Lee Bortons with Markers and Milestones, and I'm here today with my co-host Amanda Kleist. Today's May 15th, 2023, and we're joined by Tho Bishop from the Mises Institute. This is where we explore educational opportunities for young men and women beyond traditional college, all from a Christ-centered perspective. So thanks for being on to share with us the opportunities the Mises Institute offers.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's one of my favorite topics.
So I actually had just, the Austrian here with me. Oh, I've got this Zoom thing on. And in the back, there's a number of opportunities you have. And so I had called and asked to speak with someone from your institute specifically about the week-long Mises apprenticeship. Am I right that it's a week-long?
So the apprenticeship is about 6 months long, actually. It starts in July. But our Mises University program is the week-long program, and most of our apprentices will be there for that as well. Okay,
so do both of those. Tell us about the Mises University, the week-long program, and then also tell us about the apprenticeship, the longer program. But before you do that, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and something about the Mises Institute and what you do for them.
Yeah, so I am Tho Bishop. That's T-H-O. It's a weird name. Haven't met another one. And I've been with the Mises Institute for over 8 years now, which is crazy to think about. And it's such an honor and a privilege because the Mises Institute is an organization that has made an incredible impact on my life. Our focus is first and foremost proper economic education. And I think that's one of the big crises we have in America today is that the way we teach economics, which we can go into all of how economics as a discipline became, I think, really corrupted in the 20th century. But what economics properly understood really teaches you is two things. First and foremost, it's the importance of trade-offs, which I think is so important in just understanding everything from our day-to-day life to larger political implications. And the other one is who is ripping us off. And I think that's a big reason why economics is not properly understood, because if you have that lens, it's a lot easier to debunk a lot of things. And so the Mises Institute, our primary focus is economic education, and we do that a variety of ways. We have stuff tailored for students, like our great Mises University program. We've got programs for graduate students to help develop kind of the next generation of economists, either whether or not they serve in a university setting, whether they are a broader thinker, a theorist, theoretical work, whether they work in finance or entrepreneurship or a variety of other ventures. We develop graduate students within that. And then, of course, we've got great content for people that don't fit into any of those categories, that are just trying to better understand the crazy world that we're living in. And again, trying to apply that good economic lens to a variety of issues, not simply political, but newsworthy. But I think there's also a major morality aspect that a lot of defenders of free market capitalism have kind of missed. And I think that's a big reason why we are kind of in the position we are. And so that's my background. And I was a big Mises Institute fan before I got to the privilege to work at the Institute. Mises University, though, is one of my favorite parts of the Mises Institute. It's a week-long program. And really, you get within 1 week, that 1 week, 4 years worth of education. And that sounds hyperbolic. It sounds perhaps intimidating if you take it at face value. But the great thing about it is that we have such a unique environment. It's a real incubator where you've got young, excited minds bouncing ideas off each other, having conversations that are difficult to have within a lot of mainstream economics programs, with a lot of environments generally. We have students from all around the world that come in. We have faculty members from all around the world. So it's just really great environment to be in a remarkable campus. We've got a physical location in Auburn, right next to the university there. And we've got great young people that are very excited to learn. We've got faculty that get to show off their passion that they developed their entire careers. And it's funny talking to professors, they'll talk about the biggest difference between their experience in Mises U and their traditional classroom is that you actually have a captured audience where, more often than not, it seems most of the students in colleges today, they're just trying to get through the credit. They don't really care about the focus outside of that piece of paper at the end of the day. And so you're actually in an environment of people that want to learn, that you can discuss and debate. And it's the conversations that the students have amongst themselves, which I think makes as much as a lasting impact as the ideas of our scholars, if for no other reason that we also publish all the material that we have at Mises U free for the public. We've got video, we've got decades worth of videos and lectures there. So if you just want to get the information, we have a variety of other ways to get that, but there's nothing like the physical experience of being there, the social experience of being there. And that's one of the reasons why we call it the best week of the year. And I think it always upholds that that very, very strong label every July.
Yeah, I like that you say it's the best week of the year and you get a college education in a week. The reason I believe you is I had a similar experience when I was 16. Somebody funded me to go to a freedom education week. It was not sponsored by Mises, but one of the reasons we've named our program here Markers and Milestones is if you ask me the various days that are transformative to my life and made me who I am, that week was one of them. That's where I truly began to understand what freedom meant. And so I want as many young people as possible to go to events like this. So how, if I have a child over 17 or 18, whatever, tell us, what's the age limit? What do they have to do first to get to the 1 week program?
So most of our students are college aged, the majority of them. We do have, every year we have a handful of very bright high school students. Usually I think 16 is usually the youngest we go, but we'll usually have a handful of high school students as well. We will also have within that group graduate students as well. We also have opportunities for young non-traditional students, people that are they might have opted out of college and are working in a field or something like that. And the great thing is that while our primary focus is economics, we have a variety of different disciplines, different skill sets, and different experiences within that. So it's not just economists getting together, young economist students. We've got people from a variety of different professions. I mean, we've had pre-law, pre-medical school, we've had pre-law, we've had architects, we've had artists, we've had a variety. And that's the nice thing about it, is that you create this very rich environment where people with their different skill sets or different passions, you'll have a history student, talking with an economist about this aspect of economic history. You'll have an architect try to understand how the philosophy of human action, which is kind of the core of the Austrian approach, which is the tradition that the Institute is built off of, how that might apply to art and architecture. And so you have this wonderful cross-pollination of different skills as well, which again helps create this really special environment that we always have every July in Auburn, Alabama.
And so how do I get my child there, or a college student I know?
Yeah, so
what's our step one?
Yes,
Step two.
Mises.org/events is the page where we always have our events on there. Mises University is always on there. So once we get past July, the next month will automatically feed in there. The application process starts usually later in the year and goes through the middle of March. I believe so. So this current Mises University has already been filled. We've got a great lineup there. But so starting early next year, students will be able to apply. That process, we usually ask for some sort of writing sample, a letter of recommendation, and so it is we always have hundreds of applicants. It is a bit of a competitive process within that. But for those that make it, I think it is truly a life-changing event. And best of all, for our students, it's entirely free thanks to our very generous donors, outside of the cost of traveling to Auburn. But getting there, the students stay at a hotel right down the road from our campus there. We have wonderful, catering every night. We have a lot of fun social events afterwards. So that's, it's not just, work. There are some fun activities within that as well. And so again, it's a wonderful experience. And Mises.org, MISES.org is the website for the Mises Institute. The front page will get all of our content there, but the events tab up top, again, Mises.org/events, you'll find more information about Mises University and all of our other student programs, including our apprenticeship and as well as our programs targeted towards graduate students.
And how many students do you accept? You said hundreds apply. How many attend?
It depends. Usually, I think right now we're usually about 100. I think our aim this year was about 120, 130 range. We've been up to about 150 One of the very real restrictions is some of our facilities, for particularly you put 150 people there, particularly male dominated, and sometimes the bathrooms can get a little bit of issue with too many people there. But usually around that 120, 130 range, I think is what we're shooting for right now, to make sure that students have a great opportunity to really, have opportunity to meet with faculty and things like that. They've had larger ones in the past. One of the neat things is that even during COVID, while we took special precautions there, we still had Mises University. Even during COVID, it was obviously a much smaller class. And I'm really excited because this is the first time we'll be having international students really return in full form as well, given some of the travel restrictions. But, you can always count on a healthy contingent from Brazil. We've got a big following in Brazil. That's a lot of fun. You get a lot of Europeans. And so that's something I'm excited about with more normalization, is that within that 120, 130 students, part of that will be some of the European students coming back in, and we're expanding our roster size kind of closer to our pre-COVID limits, rather than restricting some of our American students that have an opportunity.
And so what does a day look like? I mean, you talked about in general the activities, but are you in seminars most of the time, or is it lectures? Is it roundtables? What's the experience?
So it's mainly like, so the materials, it's largely lectures. So the Sunday night, it's a kind of a half day. It's more of an evening event. There's a period there for registration. Obviously, a lot of travel and logistics. So we give plenty of time for people to get in, get settled, get over, get their name tag, get their photo taken, all that sort of fun stuff. And so Sunday night, it usually has more of a, sort of a pep rally style sort of feel of, really explaining to the students the importance of them being there, of them dedicating a week of their life, of a precious summer, to follow in the shoes of very serious academics, and the responsibility that comes with having that position that our donors have provided for them. And then there's a social time after that. During the week, Monday through Friday, our sessions, we start off with, our sessions go about 45 minutes, with a 15-minute break afterwards. And so it's a segment of morning lectures, I believe, usually 3, a lunch period. I believe that's followed by another 3 lectures. And then after the full day of the lectures, there is social time afterwards. And usually there'll be some sort of event. Sometimes there's a great venue in Auburn where we'll do a cookout, and there's a pool there, and so it's always fun because you get people not from Alabama kind of experiencing the fireflies, and just a good old Southern cookout, which is a lot of fun. And so usually it's a long day. It is a demanding day in terms of the academic content, but that's followed at the end of the social time. And then at the end of the week, we start working in panels so that students can ask questions directly. During the week, they also have time to ask questions one-on-one, whether that is between sessions, whether that is sitting with our scholars at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, and be able to have some of their questions that they have ready to go. But we'll also have time for office hours, for broader questions and discussions and things like that. And then Saturday, what's really cool is one of the things we ended on is that on Thursday night, every year we do an exam. It has a German name, Mündliche Prüfung, I believe. I'm not butchering that too badly. And what's neat is that Thursday night, students will take a multiple choice quiz. I believe it's 25 to 30 questions. The top performers of that on Saturday, they go in front of our faculty and are kind of quizzed on questions from them orally. And so the quiz is made up of the material they will learn throughout the week. The oral exams stick with the material and kind of get them to think in different ways. And then the final exam of our top 5, some of those questions will go a little bit beyond the pure week itself and some more of the broader literature. But the neat thing is that after that, the top 3, they win. The top prize is, I believe, $2,000, maybe even north of that. The second place, has a significant purse, and our third place as well. And so there's also this dynamic where those that really take this stuff seriously, usually it's someone who has been in the program Maybe this is their second Mises U, maybe they're in graduate school, though we've had some people that have completely surprised. We had a music major who was a first-time Mises U applicant a couple of years ago, win the entire thing. But there is that additional dynamic at the end where they can really test their knowledge of what the Institute stands for and have the ability to earn those sort of honors. And that's always kind of interesting too, to see, who are those students that you see throughout the week, which of the ones really have something, really understand this stuff. And that plays a role into helping identify future graduate students, that might themselves become Mises U faculty once, given enough time down the road, which is always very neat.
Yeah, so it sounds like our classical conversation students would be able to do it really easily, in the sense of they love academics, they are good at memorizing, they like tests, and they're good at defending their views. So they'd be able to practice that with a lot of people they've never met before, but it sounds like they'd be good friends afterwards. Is there a reading list? We're great readers in our group.
Yeah, so we have a recommended reading list for Mises University. And that can be found on the Mises University page, on that events page, and it's great. It's a collection of various the reading material matches the diversity of the topics discussed, everything from economics at the most basic level, to the broader, understanding central banks and inflation and things like that. Economic history has a play in there. We usually have some talks kind of geared more towards maybe a more political science bent as well. And so within that reading material, which we offer to students as well, within a kind of a bundled physical copy to make notes with during their time, we do have those reading materials as well. And that's one of the things that I really love about the Institute, is that it's a wonderful resource for those individuals who are autodidactic learners in their own right. If you're someone who likes to go down that rabbit hole and consume content because you're really fascinated in a topic, the online resources that we have at the Institute, again, we make them as much stuff free as possible. Whether it's going down a 700-page book or whether it's listening to a podcast, there's all sorts of great resources for those very self-motivated students like those in your groups, that I think if you really find yourself passionate about the economics of liberty, we no matter what your specific niche might be within that, we've got something for you.
That's great. Amanda, do you have questions about the university before we move on to the Institute?
Well, my eyebrows probably went up when you said university class in a week, because the piece that I'm really curious about is what they retain week +2, week +4, week +6, because sure, we can have wonderful resourcing in 1 week. They can expose us to everything in richness, but then what does Mises do about +2 weeks, +1 month, +8 months, right?
So, well, we have a variety of opportunities for our students after they leave, and some of that is writing for the Institute. Some of them take back their information and get involved in a student club or try to find a reading group or things like that. We also have, every year we create a Mises group chat, which is still, we have years of these chats that are still active with people staying in touch with afterwards. I think one of the great things though about Mises University that helps maintain that retainment dynamic is it's the discussions in between. Because it's one thing to just sit there and have a lecture go right at you.
Sure.
But it's the discussions that students have afterwards. And obviously, there's going to be some that, we have people, the students at Mises University, it will range from someone who has no idea, what Mises is at all, has never heard of the term Austrian economics, right? So we'll get those at the most basic level possible. They just know, their parents or they found just a very unique opportunity they wanted to explore. And I will say, for those that have no familiarity with Austrian economics, it might be something where for them to fully understand that lecture on socialism or that lecture on business cycles, it might take going back afterwards and rewatching something or coming back again a year later to fully absorb the material. I've heard that multiple times from those that started at a very basic level. The nice thing is we do offer that opportunity, and the great thing is that those that are there, not only do they learn, but they have a good time doing it. And so often one of our problems is kind of restricting the repeat people, because we have so many people that want to come back and do it again.
Well, that's
Um,
good that people
yeah.
want to come back and do it. And it's
Yeah,
also good
yeah.
that they can keep deepening, rebuilding their
Mhm.
foundational thought. Yeah.
And the reading list, though, which again students get prior to doing there, if you do read a lot, if most of that content, that I think helps set that floor. And I think there then having the lecture really kind of helps maintain it. But what's always fun is I also work on the editorial side of the Institute, right? And it's always great to see the number of Mises U alums that we have contributing, writing articles, creating content, staying involved, doing social media content, right? The amount of retainment that, so often when people go through Mises University, by the end of that week, they see themselves as Mises alumni, and very much that same way that they might feel an attachment to that university that they're spending 4 years at. And I think that speaks to, again, the very uniqueness of that experience, and the torch that gets lit once they're really engaged to not only the ideas in a vacuum, but the connection to why these ideas are so important for civilization itself. And I'm not gonna say that every single Mises U student perhaps has had that flame. I'm sure that you can find some out there that never once again picked up any Austrian economics work. But I think that our retainment rate, are the people that become, whether $5 a month donors, a few years afterwards, after they get out of university. I think that our records there probably compare as well as most places out there. I'm very proud of that fact.
So, we're classicalists, which means we like to define our terms, and there will be listeners who don't know what Austrian economics is, even though almost the entire Classical Conversations curriculum is around those ideas. But because they're children, they don't tend to read Hazlitt quite yet.
That's fine.
So can you go ahead and define Austrian economics from your perspective, and how is Mises attached to that?
Yeah, so Austrian economics, the term came about actually in kind of an interesting way. At its basic core, the originators of this approach to economics taught at the University of Vienna in Austria. And, that starts with Karl Menger, who was someone who helped, was one of the original people that understood subjective value, which is a very economic concept. And that kind of goes back to like the diamond water paradox. Why is a diamond worth more than water when water is life fulfilling and a diamond is not? And it goes into, well, diamonds are far rarer, water is more plentiful. And so that ultimately economic calculations are made at that margin there. If you're in the desert, that water might be worth significantly more than a diamond. And so this sort of just understanding, again, of that trade-off aspect. Karl Menger was one of 3 economists that kind of came upon this independently. But what separated Menger was his emphasis on subjective value, which means that economic value, it's not, unlike the labor theory, which Marxists believe, right, where it's the amount of effort that you put into a good that gives it value. Well, you can work a whole lot of time on something that no one besides you cares about. The value of that on the marketplace is not going to be very high, because nobody has a value in their own right to that object. Whereas, you can create something perhaps very easily that other people want. That changes a great deal. So that the idea that that economic value on the market comes from the desires, the interests of the individual consumers, rather than something objective in the good itself, is something that's always distinguished Austrian economics from other schools of thought. One of the predecessors or the successors of Karl Menger within this tradition was Ludwig von Mises, that the Mises Institute is named after. And it's kind of interesting, the reason why the Austrian label stuck, it was actually meant as an insult by German economists, because by calling it Austrian economics, it was kind of suggested that, it's those aren't the serious Germans. Those are those hillbillies in Austria. It'd be kind of the same way like a New York Times pundit might call something Alabama economics as kind of a dismissal. So it's kind of an insult that stuck, but we've made it our own because of that geographical proximity. But ever since World War II, the Austrian tradition really has been housed in the United States. And that's because during World War II, Ludwig von Mises, who was a free market economist and a Jewish economist, neither of which, were looked highly upon in the Nazi Party when they took over Austria. He escaped Vienna to actually Switzerland. The Nazis tried to assassinate him in Switzerland, so he fled to the United States. F.A. Hayek, who was a student of his, who wrote Road to Serfdom, which is a very popular book, he's also of this tradition. He also relocated to the United States. Though it's interesting, Hayek taught with Milton Friedman, another great free market economist at the University of Chicago, but Friedman would not let F.A. Hayek teach at the economics at the University of Chicago because of some of the differences between Austrian economics and the Chicago school there. So that kind of identifies some of the differences in methodology there. And so ever since that escape across the Atlantic, the Institute, or the Austrian economic tradition, really has been with the United States. Mises taught at New York University, though he couldn't get get his paycheck from the university because of already how much the economics profession within the United States had kind of been corrupted by the work of John Maynard Keynes, which was a very bad economist. That's a whole nother rant upon itself. So he had several students from there. Murray Rothbard, who got his degree from Columbia University, but attended lectures by Ludwig von Mises. He was another great innovator within the American Austrian tradition. He was the founding vice president of academics at the Institute, a wonderful writer, a very clear writer. And so there was also Israel Kirzner. There was all sorts of economists. And so from Ludwig von Mises escaping the Nazis and their assassination attempts, relocating to the United States, an entire new tree was grown from that. And that's one of the things I think is absolutely beautiful, is that the works of Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard, written in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, there are more people reading these old books today than when these men were still alive. And that's a testament, I think, to the work of the Mises Institute, to their continuing relevance. There's a lot of old economic textbooks that no one would want to read because they're not particularly relevant. That's one of the neat things. It's a living tradition that continues, and there's a lot of respect paid to the old masters there in that regard. And so that's one of the things I really appreciate about the Austrian tradition. So that's where the term Austrian economics comes from. And the big difference in methodology that's important is that Austrian economics at its core is very logical. So again, focusing on those trade-offs, understanding that individuals make choices within finite resources, that these choices will be different between individuals. And so therefore understanding the role that economic intervention has on distorting these individual preferences, understanding the market coordinates these individual preferences, understanding that entrepreneurs take on risk by creating new products and services. All of these are things that the Austrians particularly emphasize. In contrast, most of the other schools of thought, and this includes, again, Milton Friedman's Chicago school, which is free market, or John Maynard Keynes's Keynesianism, which has a lot more bias towards government intervention, they tend to separate microeconomics from macroeconomics. Microeconomics has a lot of similar sort of work within it, but they, on the broad level, try to they try to rely upon mathematical equations and kind of take these sort of very simplistic models of human action to try to replicate and predict the future. And I think that creates a lot of problems because, we are not numbers. We are individuals. We have our preferences. I think when you try to make very confident decisions, particularly when it comes to policy and political power, relied upon that really flawed methodology, I think that has really bad consequences. And I think that given that we're now, 100 plus years of Keynesian economics really controlling the economics profession, I think we're seeing those consequences in a variety of ways. And that's why a lot of people are questioning whether economics has any value at all. And I would argue that the solution to economic denialism is the uniqueness of the Austrian tradition and its continuing relevance, again, long after Ludwig von Mises has left this world.
Well, I think every single human in the realm of common sense knows economics matters when they're trying to decide whether to spend $7 on a pound of steak or a dozen eggs, right? What's the trade-off? It's just common sense. And so,
yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of academic education will take that common sense away from you, which leads to a lot of crazy descriptions about what real inflation is and things like that, where we're very much a common sense school of economics.
Yeah, and that's one thing for people who aren't familiar with the writers that you just mentioned. What's so clear about them, I think, is that they tend to take regular day-to-day events and use that to explain more complicated ideas. So they kind of knew their audience as well as being academics.
Absolutely. And I think that's why you see within our, that's one of the advantages. And I think that's why the Institute has been able to have the success that it's had, is that you don't need a PhD in statistics to understand the core of what we're getting there. That math is not a barrier. And unfortunately, they use that math as a barrier to actually prevent Austrians, to try to prevent Austrians from teaching at other universities. And so where we've had a lot of success within business schools, where you have people trying to understand, practical things to help run a business and things like that. Austrian economics, I think, has a lot of overlap and appeal to those really engaging the economy meaningfully, rather than people just wanting to pontificate about it as a alleged economic researcher in a higher at Yale University.
Hey, man, any other questions till we go on to the apprenticeship?
Well, certainly you've given me lots of ideas to think about. And one of my questions is not to be answered now, just for the audience to think about, is the conjunction of big data that is individual level about the trade-off in choices has to influence the economic thoughts of, as you apply both things from Hayek and from Mises into the modern or postmodern era that we're in, with the huge amounts of data that are being crunched super fast, but are at the unitary level of a trade-off. So I'm not asking you to answer the question because I really want to hear about the apprenticeship, but some big ideas and some fun thoughts to think about.
Yeah, and those would be good questions for people to ask and hopefully get answered if they
That's
come
right.
to your
Go explore.
programs. Yeah. All right. So move on to the apprenticeship. That's a lot more difficult to get into, and except you were students, I understand. So tell us more about that.
Yes. So our first class is this year, and we're starting with a class of 6 apprentices. And our main objective is to help cultivate a class of really content creators. And so we've identified 6 great individuals with different passions, different skill sets, different strengths, to help create under the Institute label content, utilizing various different types of social media, alongside creating videos, creating articles and things like that, to make sure that we are providing a perspective to help let us communicate with a younger audience. There's surveys out there that show that the majority of Generation Z is really open to the ideas of socialism, and I think that goes back to a point I made earlier about the poor way that we teach economics. And I think some of the mistakes in the way we emphasize economics, one of which I think is the focus on purely material well-being, at the short of the ethics and morality. And I think it's a real shame, because I think what free market economics at its core really do is that it's a moral system at its core. And I think that it's the building in almost theft and fraud within the financial system, for example, that I think has very dire consequences for our civilization. And so we've got a couple of great economic college students. We have a very exciting young woman from the UK who does TikTok and Instagram style videos that communicates economic basics to her audience over there. We've got a young mother who has been active who is a Mises U alum in her own right, that's been active in this scene and done content in a variety of ways in her own right. We've got someone who has managed a Discord server, which is a big hub where young people are gathering. Then we have an 18-year-old who's extremely mature for his age, someone really passionate about this stuff, someone who has done podcasts, someone who's done video content, someone who engages in a variety of ways. And so our goal is to put them all together and provide them with instruction and training so that they can sharpen these various skill sets. And some of that comes from economic education and a variety of kind of going deeper into specific topics, whether it is economics, whether it is history, things like that. And then the other side, though, it is more of a technical instruction. Some of that will be in editing. Some of that will be into creating a successful newsletter product. Some of that it will be in video production. Some of that will be in we have someone I'm really excited about is that we have a young Mises U alum, Will Blakely, who is a part of this website 1819 News, which is Alabama focused, and they do a lot of great reporting on cronyism within state politics. And so I'm excited about him providing that lens, because I think that's a great opportunity where, if you really want to apply the ideas that you learn at Mises University, or the ideas that motivate you, that really get you excited about, reading Mises.org, it's so easy to kind of retreat into kind of national political commentary and complaining about the Fed and things like that. And all that's important, all that's worthwhile. But if you can take that skill set and apply it to your state, to your community, to help identify, okay, well, these are the consequences of your local government, raising this tax, or nationalize or socializing this entity, of whether that might be, having government control over your trash pickup, right? Being able to take these ideas and, instead of going broad with them, going local with them. I think that's a really cool opportunity for young people that were really interested in this, because again, we're in this interesting time where there are local news deserts all around the country. I know, I'm in the Florida Panhandle. We've got one reporter that does original work between Pensacola and Tallahassee for the most part. His reporting is very, lackluster. Maybe part of that is because he's stretched too thin. Maybe it's because, he's kind of a modern journalist, and that's kind of what they do. Regardless of the reason, we have very little oversight over what our local government is doing. And so if you are a young person who wants to be active in their community, that has that Austrian lens and are willing to analyze, what the local government is doing there, I think that's a great way of providing value to your community. And so we're going to have some of that influence as well. And so our goal is to put 6 really cool, talented, serious individuals within a group. I'm going to be leading it with weekly discussions and things like that, and seeing both what they produce in their own right, what collaborations they might get together. And I know I'll also be learning some stuff, because I've been doing social media work for the Institute for, again, over 8 years now. Social media constantly changes. And so I'm also excited about the opportunity from my perspective of learning from, our 18-year-old, to make sure that I'm not losing sight on what the kids are doing these days. All of which goes back down to our larger mission, though, and that is engaging in this battle of ideas meaningfully, to make sure that young generations, that we make a serious pitch to winning over their hearts and minds. Because again, if we do not have economic literacy at that young age, it's something that becomes harder to train as they go on. And if we lose that young generation to socialism, then the consequences, the ramifications from that, I think, are very troubling.
Good. And is that a paid program or free, like the Institute?
Yeah, so students will receive a stipend during their time there. They also have the opportunity to stay. We'll have a few that are stay in Auburn early. We'll have several of them that will be at Mises U this year as well. Those that are not are Mises U alums in their own right, so they know that they've had that experience. And so we have a variety of benefits there that we'll also be giving, books and things like that as well, but giving them platforms on our own channels to promote themselves and their own brand. But that's the neat thing as well, is that the students will be getting paid for the work that they're doing with the Institute, and we'll have a review process during that, and reevaluate that as well. But I think it's a great opportunity for those. We have some that are not college students. We have some that are, but in general, we're excited about going forward. This being another opportunity, perhaps, for someone who doesn't want to go through the 4 years of a college education. This is another outlet out there where, if they're really self-motivated, if they are that sort of autodidactic learner, this is another opportunity for them to help grow a resume and a platform that they can take and find a way of being successful within the private sphere, utilizing the skills and the training and the knowledge that they get as a Mises Institute apprentice.
I'm wondering, why did you call it an apprenticeship rather than an internship? Was it intentional?
So that was there was a few stages there in the branding. Originally, we talked about a fellowship, and we had some people named after. An apprenticeship came to mind for one, because I think it was, it is something where you will be learning a trade in a school, learning a trade first and foremost. And so it's kind of a callback to, I think that sort of education, which I do think is something that we are lacking too much in society. And so there was a few voices within the decision for the specific branding of that. So that we settled on the apprenticeship label there, and again, we're excited to have that being another aspect where, just as we have had generations of Mises Youth students and fellows, and that's another aspect to it, is that we have fellowships already with our graduate program. And so this helps distinguish it from those programs. So that plays a role. We also have an internship program at the Institute, largely sort of directed for Auburn University students that want to take advantage of our proximity to learn under some of our scholars. So we did have some programs already existing using the internship label, using the fellowship label. And so this is another way to kind of identify a very specific and unique program here, and to have something fresh and exciting that we're hoping we'll continue for years ahead.
So you just said that this is about 6 months, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This apprenticeship, that they're coming in with a lot of skills, but what they're learning is the economics and then the collaboration piece in this apprenticeship, is what I've understood from your explanation. Is that a decent summary for you, or would you like to modify it?
No, I think that's a big part, as well as sharpening some of those skills they already have. And so, you can identify the passions of where these individuals are based off of the content they've already created. And that's a nice thing, is that, we can be very confident about the quality of the students because they have already shown the willingness to write or produce podcasts or things like that. We want to help sharpen those tools, though, to provide additional resources. And so whether that is some of our writers, having them work closely with our editorial team, and particularly Bill Anderson, who's a wonderful editor, as well as being a PhD economist, he's strengthening those skills and learning from others who've had success, making a career out of that as well. Whether it's the podcast side, things like that. So yeah, the collaboration is an important point. Deepening their own skills, their own knowledge of the theory, of the ideas, is an important standpoint as well. But also sharpening the skills they already have, and identifying ways that other people have been success within the private market as a communicator of those ideas, I think is something we're very excited about. Nice.
I hear also that this is partially residential. Some are there in Auburn the whole time, and some are not. Is that right?
It's mainly virtual.
Mainly virtual.
Yes. So we'll have, most of them will be in Auburn for Mises University that week. Some of them will be able to stay, a week or two prior to Mises University. They have that opportunity. Most can't because of work and other sort of things, and that's fine too. But for the most part, it is a virtual program, using weekly Zoom sessions and things like that, either as a group or with instruction.
So something that's just really that I feel like this is a very successful interview, because a lot of parents don't know that they can direct their children to institutions besides a college. There's nonprofits and think tanks in every city in the United States, and almost all of them offer training and internships and free materials. And so you're our first kind of spokesperson for that genre of those that are autodidactic, which means you're quite happy teaching yourself or exploring different ways to go and find your own best teachers. So I just really appreciate you coming on, Tho. I do have our final question, though. We are a faith-based organization. We're explicitly Christian. And looking through your catalogs and being familiar with your material, I've always felt very welcome in everything that we do. Assure parents that if we're sending Christian children to your institute, they're going to be respected.
Yeah. To start off your previous point, I myself am someone who did not graduate college as well. So and I've had obviously success in the institute. So I have a great passion for those that can teach themselves. To your last point, though, it's a very important one, particularly since I know that the libertarian label can often kind of connotate notions of very unchristian thought out there, and kind of defending some very bad things within society, and turning a vice into a virtue or a product of the market. The Austrian tradition, I think, has always had a very healthy respect for the role of Christianity in building Western civilization itself. While Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard were, agnostic Jews from their own personal background, most of our scholars, particularly, I think the overwhelming majority of our current Mises U faculty are not just Christian, but very, very open about their faith. And I think it's important because first and foremost, liberty without self-governance is I think self-defeating. And so when you come to appreciate the importance of self-governance and you appreciate the history of what a Christian moral tradition has done to bring out the best of human society, I think that just from a pure historical perspective, you have to give pause and to consider whether your own worship of your own reason, which, you know, a lot of objectivists kind of follow in that part in particular within libertarian thinking, whether that really holds up. Within the Institute, again, I think that when you appreciate the need for reducing the state, it amplifies the importance of social and those civic institutions. And one of those is the church. And so within the Austrian tradition, there is a tremendous amount of emphasis placed on the importance of morality and these institutions in terms of strengthening the liberal tradition in the best sense. Guido Holzmann is one of our great German economists, and he's written some wonderful books on the morality of capitalism and the role that inflation and central banking has on undermining the moral foundations of society. I think this kind of goes to the point I was making earlier. If we reduce capitalism and free markets purely to that materialistic lens, cheap stuff is good, GDP go up. I'm not trying to dismiss any of those things outright. If you're poor, being able to buy cheap stuff from Walmart can make a big part of difference in your quality of life. Ultimately, though, what free markets do is it allows us to, for one, maximize voluntary relationships, and so that we can choose to identify and purchase and support those that share our values. First and foremost, though, is that it really puts a limit on fraud and abuse and waste in our society. And so I think that you have to defend capitalism itself on a with a strong moral lens. And again, I think within the Western tradition, within within the foundations of America, that comes with an appreciation and respect for Christianity, and that is one of those subjects that while we do not, it is not overt within the curriculum at the Mises Institute, and you will have diversity, perhaps, there'll be some diversity a little bit within our faculty and certainly within our student population. You will have very, very strong respect for the religious values, particularly Christian values. And I think you can see it as a very safe place in a world where Christianity, I think, is more under explicit attack from political institutions, including and perhaps especially our higher education institutions, than most places out there.
Well, Amanda, I thought that was very well said. We want to have you on one of our other podcasts where we actually talk about these kind of ideas, rather than just the opportunities that are available to pursue the ideas. Any closing comments, Amanda?
Well, one of the things you said that I wanted to say, the voluntary relationship piece that you mentioned in your summary, it is beautiful to have voluntary relationships in your local community. And for us, the question we usually ask of a Christian organization is, how do you help your students go to their local church and support their local church organization, as well as whatever they're developing professionally or in an apprenticeship or in their college experience? So yes, we would underscore that voluntary relationship piece that is local to your local community is something wonderful. And it's also wonderful when you're 20, 35, 40, 45, and we will stop counting decades about now, okay? But yeah, it's something that we really want to have our people develop as they're thinking about markers and milestones, both as the students we're talking to and as the parents. So thank you for bringing that forward, though.
Well, thank you. Happy to
Well,
do so.
we enjoyed having you on, Tho, and hopefully we'll have you back again. Have a good day.
Excellent. Thank you. I'd love to join.
Have a great Monday.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye.